What happens to the circle when the young are told their first duty is to fill empty places before they have learned the weight of their own hands?
At the central hearth, the elders began asking each daughter of the house what she carried in her thoughts for the seasons ahead.
Those who spoke of waiting until the baskets were full and the paths clear found their words met with silence and turned faces.
The fire still burned, yet the rhythm of evening talk grew thinner as some voices stayed at the edge of the circle.
In the fields the next morning, the same daughters walked between rows that had once held the strength of many arms.
A few carried new life beneath their belts, coaxed forward by promises of extra grain and lighter loads.
Others moved more slowly, their eyes on the soil that would need turning long after any single harvest.
The unused sickles leaned against the boundary stones, their edges catching the light, but finding no grip.
By the river bank, the women washed the season's wool, while the younger ones watched the current.
One spoke of the long work of teaching a child to hold a tool before it could lift a full basket.
Another answered that the settlement needed hands now, not later.
The water kept flowing between them, carrying away the words that might have finished the thought.
Seasons turned, and the storehouse showed the first thin places along its walls.
Children born under the new counting grew, yet the songs of work that once passed from mother to daughter reached fewer ears.
Some young mothers stood at the edge of the pasture, their eyes on animals that wandered because no elder had strength left to guide both the new and the old at once.
At the council circle, the question returned in another form.
Who would mend the fences when the hands that knew the grain of each post were already bent to other tasks?
The wind moved through the empty spaces between the stones, and no one completed the answer.
Years later, the paths that once led sure-footed to the forest now showed new growth at their edges.
The tools that had been sharpened each winter rested longer against the walls.
Children who had been hurried into the circle looked back at the hearths and wondered why the old rhythms of teaching felt broken in their own hands.
The land still gave what it could, yet the baskets returned lighter each autumn because the knowledge of when to plant and when to rest had thinned across the generations.
If the pattern holds, the hearths will grow cold, not from lack of wood, but from lack of those who remember how the wood was gathered together.
The fields will lie half-tended because the line between one season's labor and the next has been pulled too thin to hold.
The clan will sit with its elders and its young, yet the stories that once bound them will pass like smoke through a roof that no longer shelters a full working circle.
If the words of those who came before stirred something within, then at the evening gathering one might speak what had been carried in silence, letting the thought move from one to another as the fire took the damp from the wood.
In this way, the line of knowing lengthened, each voice adding its measure so that the work of holding the settlement together did not rest on fewer shoulders each season.
The young who listened found their own hands steadied by what had been passed, and the paths between the houses remained open because the stories of how the land was read and the tools were kept had not been left to fade.
Those who stood within the circle left their part in the telling, and the elders saw that the baskets would not grow light too soon, for the knowledge of when to wait and when to act continued unbroken from one generation to the next.